Hi, I'm JT Angstrom with FreightWaves. Joining me today is a special guest, Tom Kiley, CEO and co-founder of SourceDay. Tom, welcome.
Thank you, JT. A pleasure to be here today. And as you mentioned, I'm the CEO and co-founder of SourceDay, and excited to be speaking with you.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us, and thanks for dialing in. I know you're in Austin now, but you've spent a bunch of time in Tennessee where we're based, so it's a pleasure to be able to connect virtually and have you on our pre-recorded series.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity, and definitely wish we could do these things in person these days. I know how this goes, though.
Soon enough. We're all crossing our fingers to get back to those big in-person events. But in the interim, we're fortunate to be able to have this platform to continue to maintain a high level of engagement, which is phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to us a little bit about your background, sort of pre-SourceDay, you know, how your thought leadership and maybe a small portion of your career has evolved and sort of built you into the individual, which then led you to co-found a company, which we'll talk about right after.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So my degree and background is in supply chain, logistics, and distribution from Texas A&M. And growing up and being in Austin, quickly got into the tech industry, and spent my first 7 years at Dell. A few of those years in supply chain, working in the manufacturing facility here and experiencing firsthand, supply chain breakdowns and successes that can occur. And then very quickly got into entrepreneurship. Was an enterprise software sales, got my love for software through that, and then started my first company in 2008, which is still present today, and I'm on the board of. And then met my co-founder shortly after in 2013, who ran a manufacturing company for 10 years in the supply chain, oil and gas, electronic manufacturer here in Austin. And it was his experience that really wrote and became the business plan for SourceDay, and my experience in building my first company that brought us together and really bootstrapping and co-founding SourceDay in around 2013, and then ultimately launching that product mid-2015. And the rest is sort of history. It's been a wild and exciting ride, and it's an honor to be speaking with you here today.
Yeah, no, it's an honor to have you joining me, and it's great to hear a bit about your background in terms of the real world experiences, both based in technology but also focused on supply chain. I think that sets up a tremendous background to become an entrepreneur in the technology supply chain space. And I always love hearing the founder stories. Entrepreneurship in this space is impeccable and awesome, and the stories are tremendous, and I would love to hear yours. So could you tell us a little bit about how you met your co-founder, you said in 2013, you sort of launched in 2015. Can you talk to us a bit about the idea gen process, the market need that you observed, kind of the perspective you both collectively developed, and then launching product to market, and then we'll talk a little bit about the impact that has on the market after.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And SourceDay has been a long journey, but ultimately from our experiences, Clint and myself, in seeing some of the breakdowns that exist in some of the largest and earlier smaller businesses in manufacturing, distribution, direct to consumer space, where the number one linchpin that we always impacted and felt was supplier performance, and really behind that, poor performing suppliers. So while Clint was in his manufacturing days, the number one thing that they constantly talked about was, where are my parts? And if you think back, there's been many evolutions of the supplier portal, and I don't like to think of SourceDay as a portal, but ultimately, if you kind of get down to the nuts and bolts of it, is we are a supplier performance and collaboration engine in the cloud. We're completely ERP agnostic, and what we're driving is real-time visibility out of our customers' ERP and demand planning engines of real-time changing purchase order signals, so that suppliers can now have visibility, collaboration, accountability to those PO lines down to the part number, and really be able to have proactive, engaged interactions around the misses, the items and parts that are going to create customer misses and revenue impacts and poor performance, and ultimately, in some cases, in more days now, the loss of customers where they'll go somewhere else because of poor performing suppliers. So what we've done is ultimately give buyers and these supply chain and operations organizations a platform that extends their ERP into the cloud. No matter what ERP they're using, we're bidirectionally integrating to that and allowing our customers and their suppliers to have real-time collaboration and communication on those parts that are at risk of missing, and effectively, as I mentioned, causing supplier misses that lead to a customer miss.
Yeah, that's a tremendous overview, and I'll mention, not many people know this, but when I was in the consulting realm, I had a few clients that were in the manufacturing and also airline and heavy industry space, and the MRO discussion in those worlds is a large one, and it's a big cost center, and frequently you'll find that industrial conglomerates, if you want to call them that, have a reasonable amount of visibility to high CapEx items, but a low level of visibility to consumables and other Class C items. And so I can certainly, from very personal experience, understand and appreciate the value opportunity in driving incremental, both visibility and then incrementally taking efficiency and then looking at inventory and planning and positioning and the whole 9 yards of the supply chain process for a part of the market that is frequently overlooked. And so that's tremendous. That's really awesome.
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
And so with that, why don't we talk about a few of the most common challenges you see companies grappling with respect to their suppliers?
Yeah, I appreciate that's a great leading question, and I really like to start out with some data points that we have from our platform and from our customers' day-to-day interactions, and that's the only thing constant in supply chain that everyone knows is change. Supply chain volatility is ever present, and things and unfortunate occurrences like COVID and natural disasters and otherwise just exacerbate that into higher volatility. So what we've seen through our customers' data is 40% of all PO lines are subject to change, whether it's a demand signal from the ERP, from a customer change or an inventory change, or a supplier miss where they're going to short ship or be late on a delivery, and you find out before, after it's too late, right? And that volatility through COVID, as an example, went from 40% on average to over 60% of all PO lines, part numbers, experienced some sort of change or component of risk that led to a miss for a customer. And compensating for that by overbuying in materials and safety stock and inventory is costly to your cash flows and your margins, and ultimately that miss and that kind of experience causes customers to have a poor experience. We had a customer in the health and beauty space that was able to double their presence and growth year over year through COVID, despite some of the supply chain risk and disturbances and volatility that happened, just by simply having processes and systems and prepared process flows in place that enabled them and their suppliers to be more proactive to that volatility.
Yeah, that's remarkable to hear how the change in volatility this year. It seems widespread across every single measurable metric in the transportation space, the story of volatility. So that's interesting. Now, as we think about volatility and service levels and perhaps stockouts, how do we think about the impact or benefit of visibility in the logistics space? And I think you could actually extrapolate that more broadly speaking across anyone who manages a supplier network of inventory. And again, touching back on some of my previous experiences, in a manufacturing example, which I know you and your co-founder had some previous experiences, a consumable item which may cost $10, $20, $40, $100 on your balance sheet may seem insignificant, but if it's a critical item for a manufacturing line and the manufacturing line goes down because you don't have the inventory item in place, your opportunity cost can be really significant. And so there's a lot of ways to cut down the inventory items in this space, and I just give one example. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely right. I think, when you're trusting the data in your ERP system, most organizations will spend hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars to put in inventory management, logistics, TMS, ERP, and advanced MRP and demand planning systems in place. And all of that really, just enables visibility to what's happening inside your four walls. And I think that's great, right? It gives you good data and good proactive tasks for your buyers to go be tactical and chasing suppliers down and chasing freight and logistics down and making sure you're expediting and getting things in at the appropriate time for schedules and planning. But the reality is, that's half the story. For a buyer and a planner or somebody that's managing logistics and freight, they don't actually truly see the data behind the supplier's ability to meet demand. And that volatility creates the necessity for them to overbuy in inventory, whether it's a commodity or a specialty part that they can only get from one supplier. They need to have that supplier visibility outside their four walls so that suppliers can see forecasting, see PO change data and exception data as it's happening in real time, and then be proactive and actually accountable to that data so that they're not being impacted last minute and having to overnight or air freight or next day mass amounts of orders, and they can immediately impact their bottom line by driving that automation, driving that visibility outside the ERP, outside their existing systems, and enabling those suppliers to be much more responsive and performing at a much higher level. And therefore, it's giving a supplier the ability to be the highest performing suppliers that you can, enabling them to hit your on time and full deliveries, which then correlates to lower costs, lower freight and shipping, less expedited parts. A great example that I always love to share is one of our first customers at Source Day was frequently in the automotive space having to charter air freight in full freight charters of parts last minute at the cost of tens of thousands of dollars just to get parts to their assembly line so that they could hit their customers on time in full deliveries without having to hit penalties. So, they were eating those expedite costs just from supplier misses or unacknowledged parts and POs and on purchase orders that was causing that impact. And it was a very simple problem to solve by just putting a collaboration tool to monitor performance in place.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I heard you bring up on time and full a few times in your response, OTIF,
Yep.
by acronym. Can we talk about that a little bit? It seems the industry norm or target have been earmarked, I'll call it, for a 50% rate. Can we talk about that a little bit? Is that high, low, acceptable, appropriate for today, not great for tomorrow? How do you think about that?
I think it's alarming that we've, for whatever reason, found that acceptable and just kind of been managing to live with it, right? By overbuying in those commodity parts and increasing safety stock levels, holding more inventory at massive cost, right? And having to add warehouse space and additional overhead and really just eating those costs just because of that poor performance on suppliers. And it's not across the board, right? It's not every part, it's not every supplier, but inevitably at every organization, even the most high performing manufacturer, distributor, direct to consumer is, has a supplier or two or hundreds that, are below the mark, right? And I just find that to be really kind of alarming to think that that's acceptable. And I think, one example for our customer base is that an electronics component manufacturer here in Austin, Texas, that has almost entirely sourced from China, from their suppliers, through COVID, was able to maintain a 96% OTIF, right? That's just an unbelievable rate. And they didn't do that by overbuying and sitting on inventory ahead of time, but they did have more predictability, much more visibility, and they had systems and tools in place when everyone was sent to work remote at their organizations, other than those critical and employees that were working in the facilities. The rest of operations and buying and planning and scheduling and your suppliers were now remote. And having a tool and systems and processes, more importantly, in place that enabled them to, be resilient and prescriptive in how they collaborated against supplier performance and the changes, and that increased in 50% of volatility and disruptions to the POs. And that 50% rate is again, I just can't say it enough. It's an alarming rate, and organizations have spent millions of dollars on automating sales and e-commerce and order processing and making sure that they can bring sales orders in, while leaving the back office, the operations, the buying, and the supply chain organizations to live in Excel and email. And that's what's causing that. The root cause of 50% and the root cause of those poor performing numbers is just because you've made all the investment in the front of the house and you've automated nothing in the back. So now your buyers and planners are really left to just be tactically chasing down acknowledgments and exceptions and shipments and ASNs.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned the word predictions. Let's talk about predictions a little bit. 2020 is, from a supply chain management perspective, a global perspective, broadly speaking, but at least from a supply chain management perspective, an anomaly of years, hopefully for many years to come. What's sort of your prediction for 2021? What are you advising your customers? How do you think about planning, at least from an inventory point of view? How do you think about giving good advice to both buyers and suppliers?
Yeah, I think it's been pretty obvious, right? I think everyone knew there was volatility in supply chains, as we've discussed, right? I think my bold prediction for 2021 is you need to stop enabling poor performing suppliers. You need to stop accepting that as a reality and start putting investment and effort and automation behind it. Not just automation, but predictable automation where you can use true collaborative data between your internal organization and your trading partners and your suppliers globally to really enable your ERP investment to be more prescriptive and predictable around accurate lead times, accurate forecasting, making sure you're able to reduce your safety stock levels, increase your inventory turns, and really enabling organizations to operate at the highest level possible and arm your buyers with the ability to go have real valuable conversations with your supply chain so that they can actually talk about what the failures are and where we need to improve and how organizations can actually start to operate and perform at the highest level so that they can be accountable and making your OTIF rates higher. Another big piece is I believe you're going to see a significant investment, whereas before I mentioned earlier in the front office where you've got investments being made in e-commerce and sales and automation and order processing, all of that's not fully automated. I think you'll see a significant investment in all things supply chain automation. You see it today when you're watching the news at any level and consumer products, going out of stock on the shelves due to fluctuating demand. In some cases, demand that really isn't really there, and it's being created false pretenses, driving stockouts, such as the toilet paper pandemic that happened. So I think it's going to be interesting to see organizations start to put more investment in technology and automation in their supply chain performance, driving their suppliers to be a bigger piece of their business as partners, and having better accountability and visibility to what that demand truly is and how it's fluctuating and how their performance is impacting the business.
Yeah. And now, as you think about, executive teams driving performance or seeking to enable their teams to drive better performance, what do you think are some of the top questions they should be asking their front lines to ensure that they're seeking the insights required to be able to source the information, the data, the systems, the requirements possible to fully enable their organization to improve?
Yeah, great thought, right? And I speak to a lot of executives at a lot of large manufacturing, consumer, CPG distributors every day, and some of the most alarming things that I hear is, they're asking their operations and supply chain executives a lot of questions that they can't get answers to readily, and it takes a lot of manual processes, especially when they have multi-sites and a much larger organization. Even in mid-market and small organizations, unable to answer something simple as, what percentage of your existing inventory on hand is shippable at any given week or any given day? And not having visibility to that because they don't know what's coming inbound in real time. They don't have logistics availability. They don't have ASN information, advanced ship notifications. they don't have acknowledgement data to know truly what's coming in until it shows up. And without that data, you don't know what is shippable within your inventory. In addition to that, how are you scoring your suppliers, right? Your suppliers can literally make or break your revenue targets. I was at an organization in my career where something as simple as a penny part could stop a $10 million order from going out the door and being recognized in the quarter. In many cases, we would work 20, 30 days straight, multiple shifts to make up for that. Those are hard costs that you can immediately eliminate just by having systems and tools in place to have visibility to those misses before it hits the factory floor and the part's not there to be picked. And the last place really is, and I find this one to be the most alarming, is what is the true cost of a late order from your suppliers? Most organizations have kind of guessed at a fuzzy math of $150. So I've talked to some organizations that say it's as high as $150,000 per late order. Just depends a little bit on what you're making and the cost of your inventory, but really understanding the cost of a late order from your suppliers on average gives you the ability to go and know where you need to make investments in automation and visibility across the board so that you have predictable revenue and predictable growth and a good control of your costs and overhead. Without that cost, and when I'm speaking to customers and executives, and they truly just don't have that, it seems alarming to me that they're able to actually operate and make investments appropriately.
Totally. Couldn't agree more. It sounds like you guys are working on some really awesome and phenomenal things in a market which is incredibly underserved, but with big opportunity for efficiency enhancement. So that's really exciting. That's awesome. Congratulations.
I appreciate it. And honestly, we have an amazing team. We've been fortunate at SourceDay to, continually grow and see even exciting growth through COVID, despite some of the uncertainty and tragedy that's happened. I give it all to the team and our leadership and the strategy that we've been able to, continue to make improvements in our customers' delivery to their customers.
That's tremendous. And with that, we're going to close out. Tom Keeley, CEO and co-founder of SourceDay. Tom, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
I'm JT Engstrom with FreightWaves. Have a great day.